Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce.
Good afternoon from our studio in Amsterdam. Before I introduce our special guest, just for some of you who've never used our system before, if you have a comment or a question, just type it in the lower area where you see comments or ask questions. If you want to send a private message to anyone in the group, just move your mouse over the photo of the person or their circle, and then a window will pop up and you can send them a private message. There are 3 emojis for clapping, brilliance, or funny. If you just press on that, the system will capture that information later. So today I'm really excited because we have Frank Tobé, who is kind of like a Swiss Army knife of entrepreneurship, just done many, many different things in many, many different places. I'm not going to give the full introduction. I prefer to each person share their journey themselves. Frank, thank you so much for doing this. And for those in the audience that are not familiar with Supernova or DOB Equity or what your family does, please share your journey and also the amazing work that your family does.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the TBLI team for hosting, and thanks everybody for your time in joining this webinar. I hope I can illuminate some of the issues around ESG data a little bit today. Supernova came actually from the journey that was started by my family. So I'll end there in this introduction, and I'll start with what my family does. Because that was kind of my kindergarten of impact and sustainable investing, really. Way back, about in the 50s, my grandfather started a self-service supermarket in the Netherlands, which was absolutely disruptive. The concept was, and we're now all so familiar with it, that we almost can't see it as such, but he'd come back from Australia where he was trained to become a pilot in the Second World War, came back, there was no more war, started working in his father-in-law's grocery shop. And grocery shops in the Netherlands at the time were counter-based little shops where you'd walk up to someone behind the counter and you'd ask for 3 potatoes and a bag of sugar. And somebody would get that, put it in a paper bag and hand it over to you. And my grandfather, who had no history or background in this industry or in entrepreneurship at all, thought, there must be a better way of doing that. Let's pre-package all this stuff and put it on shelves. He'd obviously seen this in Australia already, where this was mainstream. And that became one of the first self-service shops in the Netherlands. It was an instant hit. We still have posters explaining to the people who went into the shop that they actually had to get a basket, walk through the shop, fill it up, and then pay at the end. People were with pictures of people laughing. They couldn't believe what was happening. It's commercially lucrative as well. People don't think about the bill because it dealt with later, and with a basket you pick up buy all sorts of stuff that you don't really need. Part of our problems today, perhaps, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. Grow it into a large business, became a supermarket chain, and in the 70s applied the same idea to pharmacies, which were still old-fashioned at the time, counter-based little shops. It was like, let's create a supermarket of shampoo and paracetamol and makeup. And that was the biggest success. And he built that in until the late 90s, when he passed away, into a large chain with about 3,000 stores and 25,000 employees. So, that was several store openings a week towards the end of his career. In the UK, where I live, I'm based in London here, that included Superdrug at some point. And in the Netherlands, it's called Kruidvat Holding, and a perfumery chain called ESG Paris. After his death, his children decided that it was time to sell the company. Also, someone had made a lucrative offer for it, and do something with that money that would solve or address some of the key issues of our time, which was a broad concept at the time that in the 20 subsequent years, we've really converged into something more clearly defined. And so we started by giving away money to anyone who needed it: schools, boreholes, water towers, electrical tuk-tuks, MRI scanners, you name it. And then started realizing on that journey, slowly, that, philanthropy is nice, but you kind of have to come back every year to put in more money. And you built the school, now there's no books. You give books, there's no teacher. You have the teacher. And so you kind of kept going. You were like, okay, well, we've got a lot of money for one family, but this is going to go really quickly if we want to, try and change the world. And what would we have achieved by the end of it? And so we started looking for economic basis under our activities, and combined for a while a commercial venture with a philanthropic cause. So we'd have a bakery and a school, for instance, and the bakery would fund the school. This didn't work because it was a little bit of a microcosm of communism, really. When the bakery was doing well, the baker would say, I want to open another bakery and make more profit. And we would say, no, you have to build another school, right? So that didn't quite fly. And then reverse engineered capitalism on our way. We ran into this idea of, well, why don't we work according to a clear set of rules, which have been laid out by private equity and venture capital industry, which didn't really exist back then. We take a share in a company, we provide an entrepreneur who can prove that he has traction with capital and he can grow a business. Fast forward, and he can scale it. That's the most important thing. And so that kind of released us from the philanthropic model. And today, fast forward, we have a private equity fund that has been skewing towards VC increasingly over the past 4 or 5 years, based in Nairobi, investing in proven business model, growth stage startups that solve a problem for the bottom of the pyramid or just above. So people making between $1 and $15 a day is broadly the target audience of the companies we invest in. And we've done that with varying degrees of success. And I serve currently on the board of that fund. And we do that with 4 people, highly capable, much more capable than me, probably. And in addition to it, about 7 years ago, we also realized that the landscapes that these businesses were operating in were under a huge amount of pressure from population, from climate change, from misuse of resources. We have a biodiversity crisis raging on, and we said, okay, we need to do something about this as well. And so we went back to philanthropy and set up a conservation fund to protect forests and wetlands in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. And so where in Africa, East Africa, we're trying to, let's say, bring people to markets to improve their standard of living. In the conservation piece, we're withdrawing landscapes from the market to save them for nature, which will never pay you back in cash, but indirectly at some point probably will. That's my family's story, and I've always been quite actively involved in that organization. Either on the side, I've been acting as a kind of family communications manager where I travel a lot and show what's going on. And I started realizing that there's this interesting connection between expecting from your, or a big difference between expecting from your investments merely a financial return, which you can do in an Excel sheet, and you can sit in a office phone booth like this and manage it, and expecting an impact or some sustainable progress from the way you allocate your money. And that requires a very different kind of reporting. It requires a different kind of story and a different kind of knowledge. And that knowledge was always lacking. And so I started doing that for my own family first. How can I tell the stories of what our businesses are doing on the ground in Africa? How are they changing lives? How are they improving the environment? And that set me on the course of impact and sustainability data and communications, and where those overlap. And that's what Supernova is about. It's a company that helps investors aggregate and surface metrics and insights that are relevant to their sustainability objectives, and helps, on the other side of that, companies to collect and share those metrics with investors. And they meet each other on our platform.
There's lately there's been a lot of pushback from ESG because the claims, Bloomberg put out claims of $50 trillion going into ESG. If $50 trillion going into ESG, we'd probably have no problems with food security, water, or climate change. So
exactly.
that money's not going in. How are you able or trying to correct this perception that not everything that claims to be ESG is actually making a difference? Because that's what people want. You know, they're actually putting money in. You know,
Yeah.
the fund manager is telling them, "Oh, just put it in a BlackRock ETF, and you're going to fix everything."
Yes. Well, Robert, that question goes right to the core of the problem. I think there's a huge, probably ESG has become the biggest kind of global professional misunderstanding to have ever taken place in the history of the financial industry. Maybe after the 2008 financial crisis, fair enough, I'll give you that. But I think most of the trouble is that it's this burgeoning field, this new field, and we have very different definitions and expectations of what ESG means. And so people start labeling, terming and naming things that you might have a very different perception of what they mean than I do. But I think for the BlackRocks of this world and a lot of the portfolio managers within those companies and and asset managers and people who build those financial products, ESG started way back in the day as a genuinely idealistic pursuit to exclude companies that didn't have a union from their portfolios, because people, I believe this was in California, said we don't want to make money off of companies that exploit their workers. Out of that, very slowly came a little bit of an industry of selling information about which companies did and didn't have a union. But the people who started those businesses realized that that information was much easier to sell if you could sell it as something that would help you make more money. And the idea of financial materiality was born, right? If your companies operate and have certain safeguards on environmental, social, and governance issues, you stand to outperform the market. That's where a misunderstanding, I think, arose, because if something is financially material, you should have probably already been considering it when you started, right? That's then part of your investment mandate. That has nothing to do with sustainability or the impact of the company on the world. So the misunderstanding lies in this very point. It is the ESG and sustainability, the difference between the two, are the impact of the world on a company. That's ESG, measuring how it relates to the bottom line of the business that you've invested in. And sustainability and impact, the impact of the company on the world. And that might not be material to the bottom line of a company. The impact of the world on a company, measuring just that, gives you a very narrow view. Companies can be doing very unsustainable things that manage the risks really well and get away with it perfectly fine. And that's why ExxonMobil has been in these top 10s of highest ESG rated companies for years. So the first idea that we need to get through our heads, I think, is that ESG is a risk mitigation strategy that are perfectly fine to adopt. And it's yet to be proven where it will give you alpha, but I probably believe that in 20 years from now, we'll see that it does. But we must not conflate it with sustainability, which is a whole nother thing.
Sorry. How are you able, I mean, the whole issue is accuracy of data. So you're using artificial intelligence. How are you verifying or checking that the data that you're collecting about the sustainable performance of that company is accurate, thorough, complete, relevant, material? I mean, there's a lot. It's very hard to do that. How are you trying to make a difference in giving people true insight?
Right. So the approach that we've taken is we've looked at sustainability. So we're not primarily in the business of ESG. I think there's really good ESG raters out there. They must fight amongst themselves, by the way, about who's got the best rating, because the parity between these ratings overall is about 50-50, right? So it could go either way. The parity on environmental metrics, by the way, is a lot higher. I do need to give them that, but that's because they're easier to quantify. So that's the ESG space. I'm interested in sustainability. You've heard about my background. I'm interested in helping investors allocate capital towards companies that are not just managing their risks well, which, as you know, is not moving the needle, right? It's good for them. It's not moving the needle, but helping investors to allocate money towards companies that are making a difference in the world on a key issue. And there's plenty of issues to choose from, and there's plenty of businesses to choose from. So to do that, and this is exactly what the European law says as well about sustainable investing, you can't just look at the risk of the company itself. The company, or on a portfolio level, the portfolio must have a sustainable objective. It must be working towards something that makes the world better, that mitigates climate change, that addresses the biodiversity crisis, that addresses wealth or income inequality. Right? This is what we're looking for in a product that we can call sustainable. Legally, you can't even call a product sustainable if it doesn't have that sustainable objective. So what we've built at Supernova, to make sense of data and to make sure that you're looking at the right metrics first, right, is an engine to say, okay, I'm going to put in my sustainable objectives. And the way we use AI is that it will map for you the metrics and insights that you need to be looking at to track whether you are achieving your sustainable objectives. That's from the investor side. From the company side, they do the same thing. They fill out their sustainable objectives. We create for them a view of the metrics that they should be providing to present the way in which they are progressing towards achieving these sustainable objectives. And that data, the data ask and the data ask from the investor side and the data offering from the companies then meet each other in the middle. So to me, it's a very long answer to what was a brief question. The key to unlocking clarity in ESG and sustainability data is the age-old lesson to know where you are going. Set your objectives. And that's not what has been happening in the ESG space so far. They took portfolios that they already had, and they retroactively applied metrics and numbers and all sorts of stories to it to make some half-baked case for sustainability, and then sold the thing at a premium. That is not what this should be about.
Well said. Who uses your information? Are these mainly family offices, or are they institutional investors, or are they pension funds, insurance companies, retail investors? Who's using this?
Right. So, as an entrepreneur, hopefully one day all of the above. My own background, and especially retail investors. How amazing would it be if people would truly understand, and if they would take an interest, which they don't. So that's hard to create a business model on the basis of that. No, we are right now. So we're a young company. We were founded in February of last year. And so the clients that we have signed right now are family offices, and wealth managers, and a handful of institutional investors as well. These investors are spread across the public and the private realm, because the mechanism, as I just described it, of mapping relevant metrics and insights against sustainability objectives apply both to listed companies, listed investors, and private companies. On the private side, we are instrumental in helping companies collect these metrics from their investees, right? And on the public side, most of these metrics are either already published or available in third-party data sets, at least to get a first view. There's a lot of work to be done there. But I'll give you an example of each. For instance, and of how clearly formulating objectives has actually helped our customers cut through the noise, right, of ESG data. So one private markets customer, it's an obvious one, DOB Equity. DOB Equity was investing in a ton of companies in Eastern Africa that had an impact, but it was a little bit all over the place. And we were like, well, how do we quantify our impact? This was a question that just kept coming back over a decade. How do we know what our impact is? How do we measure it? How can we report that? It was just this kind of thing that kept popping up on the agenda, and it never quite got comprehensively answered. And then, the next new board members would come in and go out, and it was never quite answered. I think what we did recently changed that. So we sat down and we created a plan and said, okay, what are the biggest sustainability issues going on in that region right now? It's climate change, right? So Africa is going to bear the brunt of climate change whilst having barely any contribution to it. Global carbon footprint of Africa, percentage of global carbon footprint is about 1 ton on 53 megatons of carbon. So that is the status quo. We need to help people in Africa survive, become resilient, and adapt to the climate change that is coming. This was our 10, 15-year kind of plan that we're making. And then we said, okay, what is it going to take? We need to investing in resilience. What does that mean? And we started looking at the companies that we already had in this, and we said, hey, they're actually all investing in resilience already. Can we plot them? Yes, we could. We have energy resilience, we have resource resilience, we have finance resilience, and we have health resilience, right? All our companies fit into one of these 4. And so the sustainable objective really of the DOB equity portfolio that we uncovered was to create financial, health or well-being, energy, and resource resilience in Africa. Putting this into Supernova, we use natural language processing. It draws on each of those terms and creates a dashboard. For each of the 4 categories that we want to impact, it gets you some metrics. Financial resilience. How much money has been saved in the companies that you've invested in, right? How many salaries have been paid through the payment infrastructure that you've built? Resource resilience. How many proteins have been produced in the companies that are in your portfolio? We have a fish farm, and we have a bunch of tomato and onion farms. How much food has been shipped over your logistical networks? We have some logistical companies. Health and well-being. How many patients have been treated in the clinics or through the virtual doctors that you've invested in? Right? And so on and so on. And so the system maps metrics against those objectives. And then it became very clear. We could just start reporting. We could start requesting those metrics from the companies in our portfolio. They could use the tool to report, and the problem was solved. Can this be expanded upon? Can it be deepened? Can we help these companies to make gathering those metrics even more time effective? Yes. So that's one example. That was a private company. Starting with objectives, going into the data. Now I know what to look at, and I can shut out all the other noise and talk that's going on because I only have so much bandwidth. We've done the same for a listed markets investor, a relatively young, new wealth manager in the Netherlands. And they came to me with exactly this problem of that retroactively applying stuff. So they created a portfolio, and it consisted of a bunch of sustainable funds. Really good funds in and of themselves, but their product itself lacked a clear vision towards the future. So they were talking to all these data firms that were saying, we've got 40,000 companies in our database, and we've got 800 metrics on each of these companies. And they were completely overwhelmed. They were like, yes, but I don't need data on 40,000 companies, and I don't need 800 metrics. But they got it anyway. And so what it became was this very convoluted story in like 4 categories: basic needs, climate change. But it had nothing to do with the inherent purpose of the funds that were within it, or the. So we said, okay, let's scrap it. Let's start again. Let's say, what do we want to invest in as a wealth manager? Okay, well, we have to ask our clients. Okay, let's ask the clients. We went to the clients. What do you want to invest in? And it became clear they wanted to invest towards solving climate change and tackling the biodiversity crisis. Not easy in the public markets in a listed context, but doing less damage would also count. And so we're like, okay, here we go. Let's look at this thing. We started building the thesis. We put it in. We knew our dashboard. And when we had our dashboard, we knew what metrics to check. And when we were evaluating the universe, we knew what performance indicators to look at from company to company. And we built a consistent portfolio. And to finish that off, which I think was really cool, they said, we want to share this with our customers as well. And so we embedded all these insights that we got, that the portfolio manager was using to build and track his portfolio. We embedded them in the app that the clients had. So they could not only see their financial performance, but they could also see how they were doing on these key indicators and whether they were meeting their sustainability objectives. And it became an entirely immersive, sustainable investing experience for a wealth management client. And they're doing really well off the back of this. People love that.
So this is from basically practical, feet on the ground, starting with your family's investments in Africa, yes. Mainly, I would think in private equity or in venture, done over many years. The difference is, correct me if I'm wrong, your family's vehicle was started as a philanthropic initiative that was evergreen. And I don't know if it's true, but you never took profits out of the fund.
Correct. So it's a revolving fund. So we've got a structure where there's an endowment that was set up after the sale of the business, and the returns on that endowment are used to deploy what were back then philanthropic activities. They turned into more for-profit setup, although the view has always been, and it's also the practice, and it's the way the team thinks, it's the way the board thinks. We're an impact-first fund. So we look always first at the impact that can be achieved. Then we look at what is the traction and the business model that can substantiate this impact. And the impact must be implicit to the business model as well. So we don't want it to be a side effect of what the business does, or something that they've nicely bolted on. It must be implicit. That it works. Yeah, no, we don't take profits. Everything we make, we plow back into the East African.
I hope everybody heard that. A fund that doesn't take profits.
Well, the profits are for the new generation of entrepreneurs in East Africa.
I understand. But that's already quite unique in the world of impact or investing. So the history of DOB led to fine-tuning this approach, this data, which led to the phone app, which now you're offering for listed equity and private equity or non-listed companies. Is most of the use for private equity, or is it about equally in assets committed?
So right now, the most of the growth that we are seeing is in the private market space. So we've been doing really well with private equity because the visibility on sustainability data there is even poorer than in listed markets. And we see a kind of, unfortunately, I'm seeing a sort of satisfaction with what's there in the listed markets. There's also a different impact theory of change around a listed product. I mean, you're not directly contributing capital to the company to deploy more of what it does. So it's hard to actually make a hard case for impact, bar engagement, stewardship, voting, etc. So I think what we specialize in on the listed side is taking data that's in our database or already there and creating these objectives-based dashboards and customer experiences. But most of the growth is, and I think will be for a while, in the private market space, because it's bigger. Ultimately, there's a lot more capital concentrated in private companies, and it's invisible. Like we just don't know. There's often no bandwidth within those companies to do the reporting. So we knew we had to create something that was super simple for people to use and contribute their data when your investor came with a request and said, hey, I want these metrics. We need to make it super easy to get those metrics. If you're running a startup, which I now know what it's like, you want it to be done quickly and easily without losing out on accuracy and quality of it. So yeah, I would say private, Robert. Yeah.
And so so you developed this for the investments you've done in Africa, and then was asked to adapt this for a wealth manager in the Netherlands for their clients. So now that you've seen the practicality of reporting from the entrepreneur side, which is already hard enough to get a company off the ground, now they have to do special reporting for you, but you've made it kind of more bulletproof for them. What do you want to do now? Do you want to now scale this more targeting emerging markets, or are you more interested in developed markets?
So really, the reason the company is called Supernova is because we want to illuminate the sustainable investing universe the way only a supernova can illuminate, well, a galaxy. Fair enough, but that's close enough. So our goal is to get to critical mass. We need as many companies as possible and their investors to be on this platform, to create comparability between companies, to create better benchmarks within the private universe. And no, the fact that I started with DOB equities because I'm closely exposed to it, but I've also in my prior career advised a lot here in London, where I live, to private equity funds and wealth managers on how to communicate and measure sustainability. And so if you ask me, we're bringing it to wherever it's needed. And I believe that's everywhere where there's anyone even slightly interested in the real world connection between their money and the world, right? And luckily, with a new generation of owners on the way, I believe that demographic is growing rapidly. People are going to want that reporting to be expanded, and they're going to want to see more about what their companies are really doing.
And have you
just the numbers?
Have you reached out to retail fund managers, whether it's an ASN bank or private banks? Well, I don't know if Credit Suisse will make it, but there'll probably be some iteration, because they are looking to try to report to their clients. Have you been able to make headway there?
Yes, we have. And one of the reasons is apparently our competitors, which there are a few who sell these metrics. So they're slow with integrations. Yeah. So they're not the most agile type of company. They don't have that culture, right? They're research-based organizations. So it's kind of heavy, and it's like you get a CSV and then good luck. So we've always had a lot of emphasis on interface and on ease of implementation. So what we're winning on in the conversations that we're having with large wealth managers and banks here in Europe wanting to elevate their customer experiences is that we can do an integration very easily and quickly, and that we have no license restrictions. So a lot of the data sets that you can buy at competitors, and to name a few, MSCI, Sustainalytics, Arabesque, these are the big players, although they only own between 40 and 50% of the market. So it's still a pretty open space. They won't let you share that data with your customers. Yeah. And this to me I thought it was baffling, but I was like, but it's my money. So obviously, on the private side, I've obviously also had experiences myself with wealth managers. I said, okay, tell me what the sustainability, or I want to invest with you, but I want it to be sustainable. Mr. Tobé, no problem. We have a great sustainable portfolio. Well, and then came the whole discovery that I've just laid out here in front of you. You get these bullet points. This is why it's sustainable. I said, okay, I don't really understand. You get more bullet points. This is why it's sustainable. I said, okay, now I understand it even less. I want the data. Yeah, we use Sustainalytics to do our data report. I want to see the report. And then you get a report with obviously risk, all sorts of risk metrics, and how many controversies, and how many, what the score is such and such, and the score so and so, and the total carbon footprint, which didn't make much sense to me. But he said, I can't share this with you, but I'm going to do it anyway. I won't name this bank. But I'm going to do it anyway, but I can't share this with you. And I thought it was so ridiculous that it couldn't be shared with me. It was my money. I cared about this world. I cared for my money to be invested sustainably, and somehow I wasn't even truly allowed to know what the real world impact of my portfolio was. So I would love, but now I'm going into a little bit of dream space because it's out of focus for the current product. But I would love to create a tool where wealth management clients, people who have a pension somewhere, could just go online, scan their portfolio, get the report themselves.
Yeah, well, we having done 40 international summits over 25 years on sustainable investment, and always the struggle was every time I invited the mainstream ESG data providers, they always refused to be on a panel with their competitor. Always. Never. Oh, put me on another panel. And when we launched the Better World Prize, which is a kind of an overview of 44 independent research and data providers, we had, for the first time in the history of mankind, we had 100% success or failure, depending on how you look at it, of every single one of the well-funded ESG data and research and framework refused to present. Every single one. And it didn't matter whether it's B Lab, Morningstar, Bloomberg, ISS, ESG, MSCI, Sustainalytics, Global Reporting Initiative, World Benchmark Alliance, Value, EcoVadis, Moody's, anything, they all refused it. I think S&P agreed and then they pulled back.
And why do you think? What was
because they don't have anything good. They don't want people to know how shitty it is. If I can compare it with somebody who actually did a good job, and I can see, oh, wow, oh, that's really cool. It's also much more idiot-proof. And here you made it so complex. Even EcoVadis got $750 million in investment as a startup for ESG data. And they refused to present, even though they would beg me in the past, oh, we're poor, we would love to come, but not pay to attend. So I even told General Atlantic, which funded them, hey, you're funding someone that doesn't want transparency or comparability, but not presenting is also a statement. So the fact that you're taking an approach that you want comparability, you want transparency, you want a more idiot-proof, simple way of doing that, and you've field tested it, you're coming from it from the right point of view, I think that you'll have much more success than this, because what we have now is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's made fees. It makes good fees for all these guys and these alpha males and females, but it's not really creating a society based on well-being at all.
No, it's holding back. I agree with you. And so now something that this is listed space, but also private space. So to have a sustainable fund, you need to have a sustainability objective, which is what we heavily focus on as a starting point of our user journey, right? Then you need to show that your companies don't do any significant harm. And for that, the European Union has defined a set of metrics that you need to report on. And then you need good governance. These metrics do no significant harm, are really quite easy to find, but not if you have 1,600 holdings in your portfolio. It's a hell of a job, but they are relatively easy to find, and most investors only invest in a very small number of stuff. MSCI is selling the principal adverse impact module in their product. I've seen a price quote for one of my clients here in London for £300,000 a year. And you cannot share them with your clients still. Just circle back to that issue. My client said, we're not going to pay that because that's too much. I said, but that's what you need to substantiate your impact. This was before I started Supernova.
Yeah,
that's what you need to substantiate your impact. Yes, but it's too expensive. They are actively, these metrics matter because they actually show the negative impacts of this company on the world, right? Which is what you need. Objectives, what it's working towards, what's it doing well, principal adverse impacts, what's it ruining, if anything, which usually is quite a bit. They're holding back progress because the bar is so high to sell those metrics to people who have complex and large portfolios. So we are working on a new iteration. I can entrust that with your audience. We're working on a new iteration of our website, which will include a public portal with all the data we have on all the companies in our database, listed and private with approval. And we'll make it available for free for anyone to use.
Wow.
Right? And if you want a complex integration with your mobile apps, with your own Snowflake, or with your terminal that you're using, that's when you start paying. Or when you want to see things on a portfolio level, you pay. But I think all this data on a company-to-company level should just be available. So we're going to do that.
Wow, congratulations. I remember when I was on the advisory board, I don't know if you remember the bank Fortis. So at the time, Fortis was quite a successful bank. And then they got in trouble trying to eat up ABN, and so they went bankrupt. And during that time, we were the advisory board for the asset management. And when they were taken over by BNP, the asset man, they decided to drop a very good ESG sustainable data company based in Germany, and they were going to switch to a Swiss one who wasn't very good. And I asked them, you know that the one you have now is good. Yeah, we know he's very good. And the one that you're going to is not that good. Yeah, we know that. So why are you going to the lesser company? He says, because the lesser company integrates better with our IT system. And we don't want to spend millions of dollars to adapt our IT system and it hit me, wow. I can understand that. That's a legitimate reason from that. But it's a bad outcome, for that. And your system, you're saying you have a phone app for the actual investor to track.
So we don't have our own app, but we have an API. And so that, I think, also since the days of Fortis, which was, I believe, the early 2000, 2008, 9, 10. Obviously, we have now this very well ingrained language for applications to talk to each other, which is an API. So we have API endpoints from which the people who procure our data can request, their applications can request their data from our API, and so it can show up, and then we can develop it so that we make the final calculation as to what those numbers mean relative to the client's portfolio. So if I've invested 5 million euros with my wealth manager, or 80,000 in my pension, and we want to know the carbon footprint relative to my portfolio, for instance, which is something that's interesting to show, and whether it's been going up or whether it's been going down. We need to do an integration, but it works by and large with API. you can do, if there's good spirit and collaboration from both sides, you can do such an integration within a few weeks. But again, there's IT companies who smell the money. I'm not too interested in that. I'm interested in scaling the company, and I'm interested in getting you as many users as possible because I'm interested in sustainability. And that's why values-driven businesses, I think, ultimately will win, because the people are still harking money. It's a matter of time before people are going to realize, oh wait, this doesn't have to be that difficult. It's their business model to overbuild me, right? And one thing that we're also trying to add, because we always start with objectives from the investor, from the companies. What do we want to do next with this Dutch wealth manager is actually have the client put in their sustainable objectives, right? And get content tailored to the interests that they have in terms of sustainability. And also for wealth managers to be able to serve their clients better by knowing what they're actually interested in investing towards.
Yeah, I remember.
It all starts with objectives.
I once had a conversation with Mace Pearson before they were merged with ABN AMRO. And I was speaking to the CEO about organizing investor salons around impact. So he was very enthusiastic. And then he introduced me to the head of private equity. He was very enthusiastic. And then there was another senior person who was also very enthusiastic. And then they spoke to the head of relationship manager. And he said, none of our clients are interested in this. And I said to him, wow, that's quite a statement. 100% of all of your clients are not interested at all in impact. And how do you base that on? Oh, we spoke. They're not interested in it. What it was at that time, the relationship manager was worried about his bonuses. And because they didn't have any product, they would have to offer product of other companies or other funds, which means the assets under management would go down because it would go out of Fortis into this other fund, which means their bonus would go down. That was his definition of why our clients are not interested. Yeah, they're not interested because my bonus. I mean, now they probably figured out a way around it because nobody believes that their private bank has all of the product. What can this audience do that's watching now, and those that will watch the replay? What can they do to help you?
Well, it depends a little bit on what they do, what business or industry they're in. But if you're a private markets investor and you want to map the metrics and insights that you need to track the progress towards your sustainable objectives, we should talk, because it could be an interesting match for our product. If you are an advisor or a wealth manager working with clients and you want to show them data, or you're a portfolio manager in a listed market context, we should talk, because we can create for you similar objectives aligned dashboards. If you're interested in applying ESG ratings to portfolios that you already have, or building something that is good enough or doesn't do significant, you should talk to any of the other firms that we just spoken to. Otherwise, anybody who falls in a different category, I'm very curious to learn about what you do, and who knows what could come of it. We have a very diverse way of working together. One very interesting way also of reaching and activating ultimate owners, right, has been working together, integrating the data sets of charity partners. We've been in good conversations with Human Rights Watch. We've been in good conversations with Global Witness here in the UK. They do a lot of research on resource abuses and plundering, and they bring that back to listed and unlisted entities. And I was at a dinner there. It was a fundraising dinner, and all their rich, wealthy funders were there. And I said, maybe some of the companies that show up in these Global Witness studies are in our portfolios, and we don't even know about it. Who doesn't want to see the Global Witness data set projected onto your portfolio? And everybody instantly said, yes, we do. We've started integrating with these data sets of external providers. So that's how we collaborate with NGOs, for instance. My take is exactly as what you just pointed out, to be virtually the opposite of what this industry has been about so far. Closed loop, people who know each other. You pat my back, or you scratch my back, I scratch yours. A small conversation between professionals that doesn't involve the world that we're actually talking about and the problems that we're actually talking about. Because I think we can activate everybody around the issues that are taking place on our account as shareholders. But we need to tell the right story, and we need to make it visible in a way that it becomes undeniable, that it becomes compelling, right? And so that's, and that it's open, easily accessible. Frictionless is a word we use all the time in trying to describe the way we've designed and used our tool. So, yeah, I went on a tangent, but
No. Finally, somebody's speaking the radical truth about the ESG nonsense, because the way it's become everyone kind of saying, I have a membership card to the fitness club of ESG, but I never go.
yes,
I never get on the machine to actually exercise. But I'm making my fees.
And that's where most of the money is made, of course, in the gym context especially. It's the people who don't show up. And I think I also always compare it, the way that a lot of the companies present themselves is I always compare it to one of those restaurants that you go to that has a menu with 260 dishes on it. You know, like it's all we're doing, everything, anything you want, it's all we're. And then it begs to wonder, like, if you have so many dishes on your menu, they can't all be fresh.
No,
you know, and that's a big issue. It's naysayers. We need to start making a clear distinction between portfolios that are ESG integrated, which are fine risk-adjusted products, and portfolios and investments that work towards sustainable and impact objectives. Define those objectives, find the metrics that you need to work towards them, buy them and track it and see if you're doing well, and build pipeline within those objectives. It's not really that complicated.
Well, I once asked a guy I know who ran a big foundation in The Hague, and they had 500 million euro in assets. And he said, I'm going to start doing ESG, and I'm going to do it probably wrong. I'm going to make lots of mistakes, and each year I'll try to do it better. And he fought with his wealth manager, who said, no, you can't do it. You're going to lose all your money. So I said, okay, I'll go find another wealth manager. And then all of a sudden that wealth manager could do it. And he said to me, after each year doing a better and better and better and better job, he said, Robert, it's really not that hard to do if you want to do it, but it's really hard to do if you don't want to do it. And it was true. And he said, I'm not doing the best job. I'm trying to do each year a little bit better from what I learned.
Right.
And from what I understand, because your passion seems to be in nature, in Africa, this would be ideal for the DFIs. Have you been able to get through to any of them?
Yes, because I worked closely with many DFIs in my previous career. So I love the DFIs and their work. The style of working can be a little slow and governmental. There's reporting about everything, but then again, we happen to be a reporting solution. So yes, we are working with it, and they're currently on our client roster. Yeah, and at DLB Equity, I obviously know them. They often are co-investors into similar businesses. And what you find is that they're using systems that just make everything. It's exactly what you say. It seems like these systems are built by people who don't want transparency in sustainability and impact. So it needs some level-headed thinking, clear minds, good interfaces. I hope that with what we've built, we can bring a little bit of I don't want to compare myself to it, but I take it as a case. What Apple did to personal computing, right? To clarify the experience, to take it out of the domain of deep experts and experts alone whom, by the way, dare I say it, very nervous. Everybody's nervous they don't know enough. And so the response is, I'm going to pretend like I know everything, right? And so that's also the risk of this kind of new space. No, we need an Apple moment, a clear lead in, an interface, a way of making it all user friendly. Yeah.
And it's also good to kind of burst the bubbles of the so-called experts of investment manager. I remember once meeting the head of Goldman Sachs for the Benelux. He came to our office, and I said to him,
Yeah.
I can't prove it, but I have a feeling the investment manager is wrong half the time. And he said, no, 3/4. And I was thinking, wow, would I go back to a doctor,
Yeah.
car mechanic, dentist, painter, what a plumber, who 75% of their decisions were wrong? I guess that's fine if you're a baseball player and then you have a 250 batting average. But why is it they need to be paid 4 times of what they actually deliver if they're wrong 75% of the time? And at the same
Yeah.
time, be so
Yeah.
arrogant that they know everything.
Yeah. Kind of comes with the job. It's the job description, though. Well, like that's, I don't know. Maybe that's how it works. I'm not entirely sure about that.
We're coming toward the end. Do you have any final comment? We're going to go into a mixer shortly. The replay will be ready in about, I don't know, 60 minutes or so. If you want me to add to the email that will go out to everyone who registered for the replay, just send me, whatever you want to share, whether it's just the website or your LinkedIn page. I'll do that, and that will go to everybody who had registered. I really enjoyed this because it was very straightforward, honest, no bullshit, and also trying to bring simplicity and clarity to something that everybody wants to make super complicated.
Yes. Yeah, I hope so. Those are my final words. I hope we've been able to deliver a little bit on that daring title of this webinar, because a lot of them have that title, and then you've seen it and you go, oh shit, it's even more complicated now. I hope we've been able to do a little bit of the opposite, and I really want to thank everyone for their time. So yeah, I think I'll stay for the after. I'll stay for the after.
Let's take a group
session.
selfie to prove that we were actually working today, to our friends and relatives. So, Frank, this has been a joy. Thank you so much for doing this. If you want to add your photo to the group selfie, just wave to the camera, and it will make a photo of yourself and then add that in a kind of postcard, and then I will send everybody a copy of that. So this has been absolutely fantastic. I want to thank our entire production crew for making this webinar possible. Sam, our producer, crypto genius and ramen critic. Ricky, my absolute better half with no filter. Xi Jinping, our head of transparency and integrity. Vladimir Putin, our head of conflict resolution. Jeff Bezos, our human resources and full text compliance leader. Elon Musk, our humility coach, and George Santos, our truth mentor. Thank you all for making this fantastic. And thank you all also for, and Frank is very accessible. He's a great guy, and what you see here is pretty much what it is. So I'm going to end the group selfie, and we're going to go right into the mixer. Okay, here we go. All right, let's do this. So, okay, let's get started.